This is the Economic Review. The recent Kenya market update by Knight Frank shows that the average occupancy rates across commercial buildings at the end of 2020 stood at about 72%. The decline in office uptake and rental values is mainly attributed to the continued oversupply of commercial space in some locations and unfavorable economic conditions, which resulted in majority of their occupiers halting their space requirements as staff worked remotely. Despite the retail sector being one of the hardest hit sectors due to the pandemic, prime retail rents remain unchanged over the review period as a result of retailers upgrading to spaces previously taken up by struggling businesses. The residential sector remained a buyer's market in 2020 as prime residential rents declined sharply by 10.25% compared to 2.8% in 2019. The decline was attributed to the continued oversupply of rental properties, less disposable income due to the unfavorable economic climate as a result of the pandemic, budget cuts from multinationals and fewer expatriates in the country. Now, these factors also resulted to a decrease in sale of prices of prime residential properties in Nairobi by 3.9% in 2020 compared to 4% in 2019. All right, to help us put that report and the outlook of the real estate sector into perspective within this COVID-19 pandemic, we are joined by Reginald Kadzitsu, an economic analyst, and Effie, who is a real estate research analyst. All right, let me start with you, Effie, this morning. Can you help us put that report into a proper perspective? Can we start from what the outlook of the real estate sector is in 2021?
Thank you and good morning. We are overall neutral for the real estate sector.
Yes.
And this is mainly because currently the sector has been affected in probably, I would say, different ways. We have the residential sector, which is grappling with the effects of the oversupply in the high-end market. Also, we see a shift from to affordable housing options. So a lot of people are moving from the high-end areas to the lower mid-end areas,
yes,
or the more affordable home areas where we have affordable homes. And then for the retail sector, we currently have an oversupply. However, this is not as much as that of the commercial office sector. We have a lot of factors cushioning the performance of the retail sector, such as Kenya being ranked as at number 56 in the ease of doing business. We have, even though we are witnessing a lot of exits by both local and international retailers, we also see a lot of aggressive uptake of prime retail spaces from, let me say, the retail giants. We see a lot of expansion by retailers such as Naivas, Carrefour, Quickmart. This is also likely to cushion the performance of the retail sector. For the commercial office sector, we are generally negative. We have a lot of oversupply in the commercial office sector. And then we also have the working from home initiative due to the COVID-19, which is bringing about a lot of vacant spaces for the office and also rents going down.
Let me stick with you as well, just before I cross over to Reginald Kadzitsu. I mean, we haven't been performing well in this sector. I mean, you have to go back all the way to 2018 and then say, well, that's when the rain started beating the sector. Are we out of this recorrection phase? Has the COVID-19 pandemic introduced another correction phase as well within a correction phase?
I wouldn't say that. It's just we are having the effects of the pandemic.
Yes.
Let's leave alone. The oversupply started in 2018. But that was mainly because of the rapid expansion and development by most developers. But leave alone the you are talking of 2018 per se,
yes,
when the performance of the real estate sector started going down. But I wouldn't say it's so much. It mainly happened in the commercial office sector. COVID-19 pandemic just accelerated the, let me say, the effects of the oversupply for the commercial office sector. This is just something that we are seeing for that will happen just for the meantime. It won't take much. If we get them, let me say the vaccine that is currently being circulated all around, I think things will get better. It's not about the real estate sector being bad at all. It's just about the tough economic times that is affecting people, including and also the COVID-19 pandemic in general.
Yes.
So
Reginald,
we are yet to see a positive turn.
yes. Reginald, let me cross over to you as well so we can actually get to look at what is left for it. And I will ask you, is the affordable housing drive, now agenda, and we see exactly the incentives that the government is throwing around it, can they be enough to ride the sector through the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Morning, Simba.
Good morning,
I can
sir.
see you have your spillover effects of Valentine's on your pocketing.
I wish they were true.
Now to the retail sector, to the property sector, Simba.
Yes.
What ails the property sector in Kenya is that over the years, the demand for property in Kenya has not been driven because of an increase in wealth or income of its populace, but has been driven by, one, people trying to clean their money from corruption, two, a lot of hot money coming into the country from South Sudan, Somalia, and some money from the diaspora people. Not so much, but it's what has been used as an excuse that has been driving the demand. So when you have a demand being driven by pretty much illegal means, or should I say means which are not congruent with growth in stable fundamental economic principles, then you will reach a point where you climax or you influx, like what we are seeing right now. Why are we seeing that? It's because if your incomes and the wealth of your populace do not increase, then you do not have people that want to upgrade their lives and say, I want to buy a house, I want to do this, because ideally they cannot afford to do that. So when you see the high rises coming up, especially in the commercial property sector, you look at a building office space come up and you're wondering who is going to occupy this building. Which businesses are coming up that can actually occupy so much space and pay that rent, considering that that is not happening in the economy. And that's why we have a lot of ghost buildings in Upper Hill. Nice, tall, beautiful buildings, empty inside. Why? Because most probably, one, pension scheme decided we need to build a building. No viability was done, an assessment was done. Do we actually have business that will actually occupy these buildings? No. The most major companies already own their own buildings. Your multinationals, your banks, your big corporates already own their own buildings. So they're not going to be looking for space coming around them. So if you come then to affordable housing, I always stand by the principle that what is affordable housing trying to do? Affordable housing is trying to cure a symptom of a large rural to urban migration. And the problem with that is the day devolution starts working properly and the day we get proper leadership that will start creating jobs where people live, you realize if you rush and try and develop affordable housing in Nairobi, you'll end up with ghost homes because the flow of people is going to reduce with time, because someone in Kisumu will have no reason to come to Nairobi to look for a job because jobs are being created there. So affordable housing is trying to cure a symptom of rural unemployment. And the symptom is not, and the problem is not a lack of housing. The problem is rural unemployment. So you build these houses, then the next 5-10 years, these houses start becoming empty. And it's a trend you are seeing even when it comes to rental income growth. It has been stagnant, growing at 1%, 2%. I think last year it grew by 3%. You then look at it and say, why do I need to hold property in my investment portfolio when I can get 14% from a government bond, tax-free, stress-free, and all? So as Kenyans also get educated to know that you do not get wealth by buying into property. property is part of the assets you can invest in, especially as a hedge if you expect future inflation, but not as a way of, I will buy a piece of land, I'll buy a property, it will go up by 400, 500%, I will become wealthy. I keep on repeating this point. If you look at the top 10, top 20 richest people in the world, none of them ever made money because of buying a piece of shamba here or buying a property. They're trying to spin it at 3 times the amount going forward.
All right, Effie, let me bring you back on that as well as we continue with this conversation. If you look at the data that we have there in terms of the way in which banks have been viewing the real estate sector, then you can say, well, it's not really what it needs to be. Yes, everybody's cognizant of that fact, but it has been on an increasing trend. How do you think banks now view the real estate sector within the COVID-19 pandemic? And what will be your talking points on how they view that sector?
Currently, according to my argument, banks view the real estate sector in general as a highly illiquid investment.
Yes.
Not ideally a bad investment, just that there's an issue of liquidity here. You see, it's more of me getting money from the bank and converting my money into stones in form of a building. So getting returns from that money in the wake of economic uncertainty is kind of hard.
Despite it being increasing, how would you explain that trend of increasing credit to the sector? Effie, well, I'm going to come back to you. I don't know whether you can get me now. We seem to have some sort of connection problem here in the studio. Can you confirm whether you can get me now?
Yes, I can get you now.
Fantastic.
I'm sorry for that.
So, Effie, well, you're saying that, well, the view at the sector as quite an illiquid sector. But then if you look at the data that we have for you, you're going to see that, well, it has been increasing. How do those two marry?
Okay. The increasing bit is more of developers,
yes.
You see, giving a lot of discounts so that they can convert their investments into uptake.
Yes.
So, for example, I don't have money right now. I need that money to repay my bank. So what will I do? I'll give discounts so that I get at least enough money to give my bank so that they don't cut me off from or classify me under an individual giving non-performing loans or something like that. So that's why probably you see a lot of activities in the real estate sector going on, especially for the residential sector. I get money from the loan, from the bank, get loan, build my home. Then after building it, I don't have a person to buy the home. Why? Because there's no money in the market. So what will I do? I will have to reduce my prices, make it kind of affordable for everyone, and that's why we see a lot of investments going around, probably in the residential sector.
Yes. Reginald, can you help us clear this conversation this morning, therefore? I mean, how do banks view the sector, despite that increasing trend of credit to the sector as well?
You need to understand, banks are what we call collateralized lenders.
Yes.
They would lend the sector where they can get collateral. So in Kenya, the manufacturing, construction sector is the only sector that gives them the best collateral, because when you build the house, they hold the title of the house, so that if you default, then they at least have something to cover their losses, and that's why you will see a lot of money going to the construction sector. But if you notice now, with time, banks are realizing you hold a title, one that has been valued at 10 or 15 million. The day someone defaults and you want to go auction that title, you realize it's only worth 7, 8 million. So whatever they thought they covered themselves, they've actually not covered themselves that well. So with time, you're going to see that trend reversing. And as the country also starts to strengthen its AML frameworks, anti-money laundering frameworks, try to curb corruption, you realize also a demand for some of these ghost and unrealistic construction activities will also reduce, and banks banks will also start reducing sending money there. But the reason banks give money to the construction sector is because it is easy collateral for them, which balances their books a bit better in terms of risk.
Pretty much. At this point, I would like to release Effie Otieno, who has been with us at the beginning of this economic review, and cross over to the last part. Electricity distributor Kenya Power has announced plans to join the solar business in the country. Now wait, to stay relevant in a market that is increasingly shifting to solar energy to stave off the high expenses associated with the hydropower in the country. Now, the move that the energy provider says will protect its customer base and safeguard its long-term revenues is viewed as a defensive one, as the bulk of its customer base, made of its industrialists, contributes 54.8% of the revenues, is feared to be in the leading pack in the shift. Now, the utility firm now plans to extend its solar power coverage net around the country and install panels in private houses and office blocks as it looks to offer users cheaper uninterrupted electricity. In internal documents seen by the Business Daily, the power provider says, and I quote, according to the Daily, consumers will benefit from cheaper solar energy generated during sunny hours. Now, the solar plants will include storage with minimum autonomy to cancel out effect of short duration supply interruptions, which has been a major cause of concern among some commercial and industrial customers. End quote, according to the Business Daily. Okay, good. Now, Reginald, is this a wide move from the energy provider? I mean, we have to ask that question.
I don't think it's a wise move. The issue that we have, Simba, is we don't invest in research and development as a country. We are not innovative enough. We wait for innovations from other people in the world, which are irregardless of how the economy works or how the demographics or the social demographics of the country are. Kenya Power should be saying that we have discovered a way of either storing hydro energy instead of just generating it and transmitting it directly to meet supply and demand,
yes,
than for them to be reactionary. Number two, their grid is not designed for renewable energy. That's the truth of the matter. Their grid is designed that electricity is generated, it is fed into the grid and transmitted to where supply is. And that's why we have oversupply of electricity in Kenya, because demand does not outstrip supply. We have a lot of lost electricity that comes in, because electricity is not stored. It's generated, transmitted, and used. If you are going to move to solar, number one, solar is generated. After it's generated, if you transmit it to the grid, solar is what we call intermittent power. You only have sun for most probably 8 hours of a day. If your solar panels are on top of your roof, your roof or your house does not rotate from east to west with the sun. That means you'll only get electricity, you'll only be able to store electricity the moment the solar panel is facing the sun. After that, whatever you have stored during that period needs to last you for the rest of the day and the rest of the night. And you need to know that peak demand of electricity is actually in the evening. It's in the evening. So if you have a solar panel which you have spent an arm and a leg to set up, and it's only 20%, 30% efficient, then is that really efficient form of electricity? I do not think that is a smart move. Unless a solar panel rotates with the sun, which now becomes more expensive, then solar energy, as much as it's clean energy, as much as it doesn't have much carbon emissions, it is actually intermittent, because you have to store it to be able to use it when there is no sun and when you have your peak demand. Number two, if Kenya Power wants to do solar, generate solar and put it on their grid, we have to look at the issue of the environmental issues with it. Because unlike a wind farm, where you can still put your turbine and people can still farm underneath it and carry on, a solar panel, once you put it, no one can do anything on that piece of land. So if you're going to have a solar farm, you're looking at thousands of acres or pieces of land, which are saying that they will no longer be used. Depending on the topography of the land, you might be looking at quite a lot of land. So I think we are still a bit far away from saying that solar will replace hydro, or solar will replace geothermal, or solar will replace normal thermal electricity. And that's why solar is only 2%, only contributes 2% of the power of globally. With people that have innovation and technology, solar only contributes 2%. So I think we are still far away from that. It's a lot of noise and a lot of talk.
Yes.
If you are Simba, you want to put a solar panel on top of your house, you go ahead, but you just need to know it's not a one-time cost, because that battery only lasts for 10 years. You have to replace that whole battery, that whole system after 10 years, and you need to have good storage batteries, because when it comes in the evening and there's no sun, and look at Nairobi right now, it has been dark for the last 3-4 days. Have you stored enough for you to last 3-4 days? So I think we're a bit far off from that, and Kenya Power are better off spending their money investing in research and development on different types of technologies.
Yes. Now, Reginald, as we clear this conversation this morning, now remember this comes after the government sort of started to police this specific industry. Now let's talk about it. Under the Energy Solar Photovoltaic Systems Regulations 2020, I mean, yes, we did see that, and we did see the uproar around the country once we started to see exactly what you needed to be in this business. And Reginald, when you look at that performance sheet for KPLC, which is negative from top to bottom, somebody would have asked you, is this them trying to get what they can get? Because at the end of the day, they have to get something.
Not really. As in, sometimes it's good to put a bit of regulation in certain areas. Like if you want to go drill your borehole up to a certain point, you need to go get a permit and a license to be able to do that.
Yes.
To make sure that at least the water tables are maintained and people are not just digging holes everywhere. But when such a regulation comes and says, oh, if you want to do solar panel and all that, yes, it's good to make sure that you don't have quacks doing it, because then it also becomes dangerous. But it's sometimes a case where the government does not know its role. If people are able to actually help themselves and put solar panels and have a good supply of electricity, it increases productivity of people. Increases better education for children, because they can do homework and study even later into the night. So regulation is supposed to come and make the environment conducive and not become punitive, so to speak. And maybe just a point to note, when this solar panel craze came over globally, most people and manufacturers started manufacturing solar panels and all those things, and there was an oversupply of solar panels, and most of those companies are now broke and out of business. So we also need to be very careful so that we don't end up in a quail egg situation. In the name of solar is now the new thing. Everyone now says, I'm a solar installer, I'm a DSTV installer / plumber / everything. One person can do all those things. So it has to be a strategic decision by the time you are installing your solar panel, considering all the costs that you need to consider, and the efficiency that you will only be using 20% of that solar panel, considering it does not rotate with the sun.
Pretty much. Reginald, thank you very much for taking your time this morning to speak to us here at Metropole Television, sir.
You're welcome.
And that is your show then. Good morning.